So question just one specific hangbako of the National Disaster Management Authority na matam na guidelines bako and the earthquake deal to the guidelines, tsunami deal to the guidelines, and the urban flooding deal to the guidelines. The latest one that we have is glacier lake outburst and the world in 2020 has guidelines but the problem is karino guidelines kuntra muglai if not third 25 to 30 like guidelines National Disaster Management Authority in people guidelines adubu each guideline I think 25 guidelines like 25 guidelines later, 25 guidelines into average basis 60 per guidelines never. Right, she said links in EMO. So the question is it worth it? Nearly 3,000, 1,500. I putting the calculator. So my idea is, idea this is it worth it? 1,500 pages. Every is 1,500 pages la aneba. Adubu question chidi asumaina hangba guideline ki question chidi karino hairaga. Chahi kudingi hang musunate ko. Adubu hangdi hange aduna che koi miss it tawbi yadre. We cannot miss this. This has been a pattern, a trend. Amura kakta gana trip. Anira tumana ko mom se asi same model. Adumana guideline me say hanga bunina. How do we deal with it? Now the masida this guideline ki portion se the marks say 15 lo ani kaido. There's just 7 marks kumba kakta nebo ko. Sahi amada. Adubu aina haiduna each guideline. Guideline each guideline has about 60 pages on an average. The 1,500 pages for 7 marks, is it worth it? And the National Disaster Management Plan, it is also somewhere around 300 pages, I think. But my idea is how do we tackle this? Because this has been a pattern. So aduna masigi sida bear with me on this. I'm not going to teach, and there is no need to teach also. Adubu, what I'm going to do is since I'm teaching here, so let me take the trouble because you're paying also to this coaching institute. So let me take the trouble in studying all this. I don't know what is this. Wait. I hope. The situation though. So okay, that should be good. So guidelines for us at the exam the guidelines detail the not the exam 60 pages of guidelines, so you're going to write for 7 marks, which will be just around say over 100 words based on high handwriting that's out in a page and bear with me. I will make a note on all of these guidelines. Let me study and read these guidelines, these papers, and then looking at the requirement of the exams and then also looking at the model answers from those successful students. There is no shame in admitting that, no shame in taking help from successful students. So because I've looked and did some research on it, and also has I joined the applied on guidelines makai to the like I said, deal to the deal to we so what I'm going to do is I know the exam maybe in the month of last week of October, November, do I the PDF PDF exam point of view the specific guidelines for specific hazards. So you don't worry about it. No, in the question though, guidelines, guidelines, you don't need to answer, read each and every pages of the guidelines. Madugi specific hazard to the guidelines to the headlines call main theme the detailed and that is not what is expected of us also. And if they expected that from us, then it is not possible also. I only the call possible to and because look, if you pick just one of the guidelines, then you will understand what I'm saying. So I don't see paper say deal we will only deal with what is necessary. For example, the guidelines is the high grade, and it applies the same for this plan, national plan on disaster management also, national plan policy on disaster management also, and the same goes to National Disaster Management Act of 2005 also. So what is only the basic that we have to know. So aduna disaster management, let's look at some of the hazards. Why I'm coming back again and again to hazard vulnerabilities, capacities is because you look every of the question papers almost all of the question papers revolve around these issues. If we have a good hold and grip on this, then we don't need to worry much about disaster management. Okay, I need this. This is one blank sheet. Okay, just use here. We were talking about disaster yesterday, but we will talk about disaster management. Disaster management is disaster management disaster disaster management disaster management definition. What is disaster management? Definition, official definition in India. What we see here is disaster, any disaster there is time before disaster and there is time after disaster. So Masida or disaster management, the disaster management encompass all the events which is prior to disaster, which happens during the disaster and which took place after disaster. And then masigi events se karamba component mayam da revolve tawge haiba matamda aina ngara hai ke hazard capacity vulnerability asida loina keno tawrakani ba circle tawra laine ba issue makai se ko so asi definition je chum cham pa se ko kari hai ribno hai ba. So, Disaster Management Act of 2005 defines disaster management as an integrated process of planning, organizing, coordinating, implementing measures which are necessary for preventing of threat of any disaster, as a pre-disaster or recall, and then reducing risks of any disaster or its consequences, as issue pre-disaster or recall, readiness to deal with any disaster, pre-disaster, promptness in dealing with disaster, after disaster, assessing the severity of the effect of in disaster, after disaster, rescue and relief during disaster, after disaster. The idea, the basic idea of disaster management is the management of disaster prior to disaster and also after disaster. How are you going to organize the time scale? The time scale of disaster management is before disaster and during disaster and post disaster. But what are you dealing with? What are you dealing with? In all of this three time scale, you will be dealing with the components that I told you about yesterday. You will be dealing with vulnerabilities. So vulnerabilities to get horse. So let's start with vulnerabilities. So India the vulnerabilities nainaba matamda India the vulnerable oiba hazard khara nainase ko not all orgasu ngamgadi pai khara nainasi hoji ko yengse India the hazard khara hazard sida landslide hairase ko landslide akoina kramaina speed kramaina approach to landslide ngarang hai kre India is prone to landslide haina ko hai adudi first akoina khangalo landslide si karino haido haibi khangalo ko akoina ren geography naina geography tambaganda loina budi tambigani adubu hojik geography class na tabnina adum kharadi naina si adu in detail geography to naina kan han tha jai adu idea of landslide se khajiktan ko khangdragadi akoi nainaba abdi disaster management nainaba kan hitang wa bugi oibi ai ko karino hairaga ko India the landslide prone oiba regions in karam bano hairaga you will need geographical knowledge ko so India the geographical prone oiba say common sense ni karino high altitude region have ching yamba mountainous region ko any other mountainous region laiba regions in the karam area de le ko Himalayan region ko northeastern region su le ra du ki ko western Ghat region ko so eastern Ghat so dum ko krab dilai du the landslide is not a major issue there later the landslide ki causes kari na landslide thok bi ai nemo hojik asida question fazaba I mean, I believe that was 2020 or 21. Landslide. Difference between landslide here and here I have hung say. Western Ghat ki landslide ka Himalayan region ki landslide ka khena usi kari no see. We are talking about landslide. I do not, but if you don't have an idea of landslide, how are you going to deal with it? Now, even disaster management ki landslide ki yenga ko matam su nang masi ani ki characteristic khena usi khajitang or su khangdragadi. Hoi nangi answer to the pazagani nang answer ibunga muni to specific on hangagadi tang work ko yai ko asina adubu akoina yenga do de asigi landslide ki causes one is akoina dum aji common moiba or standard answer we say like deforestation ko deforestation gumba hai bi ai adu digidi kari hai bi ai deforestation na maram moiraga nung churakko matamda landslide tawre ko adumai hai adubu asida asi anigi da amagasu kanu oiba one of the reason is also earthquake asidani law ina connect or earthquake is also a hazard call. So every one hazard is not exclusive in itself. It can have interlinkages and overlapping. So earthquake is also one of the major causes of landslide, especially ASEAN area. The ASEAN areas OBI, altitude is OBI, and also because of the geology of the region, the nature of rocks, the nature of soil of the region. ASEAN region, the geography, these are very old regions. Ariba land masses never go. Around these Himalayan regions, these are new formations. And how's it power the Indian plate? Plate tectonics and geography, the theory of the plate tectonics. Indian plate is still now colliding with the Eurasian plate. Aduna plate tectonic active earthquake frequent way. Earthquake is a feature of the region. Aduna maram moiraga Himalaya se formation of Himalayas the Eurasian plate Eurasian plate from site Asian Indian plate from site Ashini Thongaina folding the folding Tauraga Himalaya se king and it is still growing because the collision is still going on. So new landmass the geology, the type of soil, the type of rock of this region is unconsolidated, and as compared to this region, landslide phenomenon apart from the rain, deforestation, and then developmental projects apart from that, this earthquake is also one of the factors for this hazards. I idea discuss to just give you the idea of what hazard is and the interlinkages of all these hazards, and also the knowledge of all this hazard, because hazard list of higher. So the disaster management part disaster management part I see jumble up let's go back a little bit to the history of what disaster management is. See, disaster management when we look into the history we see elements of disaster management, some practices of disaster management since ancient times. Romans fire brigade people who took care of the fire and the fire incident take care of Pompai volcanoes movie I'm not wrong. Mount Vesuvius volcanic eruption Pompai town I don't remember exactly the town name, that is not important, but the idea is volcanoes to one that the other town, not Pompai, the other town was completely submerged with volcanic ashes. And then Pompai through its summers, but the more people were evacuated from the town. And then Madugi evacuation, the historian says that there are some elements of disaster management, rescue operation, evacuation, the process naiba, systematic naiba, authority level systematic on a process on a handle historians in so the idea why I'm mentioning is to give you the idea that disaster management, as we know, the idea of disaster management has been in since olden days. I see. For the purpose of our studies and as we contemporary times, in the UN level, I mean early 60s 70s the disaster thokpa matamda the UN Secretary General की authority की मखादा disaster thokpa relief piba fund mobilize tawba adugumba incident laiba adubu masida maru oiba step by the UN hierarchy the decade of 1990s ko 1990 dagina 1999 bause decade of disaster management ko adumaina international decade for natural disaster reduction haina asigi decade se celebrate tawhiba ko asi tawba matamda UN nasu towards its member but there were mandates or requests or any strong move on the part of the UN towards its members to formulate a disaster management policy or disaster risk reduction policies to by the members of the UN. Same number UN the issue move like so many one important incident happened. Some important events go. Now I'll be moving when disaster management of Sendai framework. I will trace you a little bit the journey towards that go. Aduna Masida UN 1999 1994 the first World Conference on Disaster Reduction 1994 the first World Conference. I see from PT point of view the important the men's unity not very important the global effort the question this is going to be your answer. So 1994 the first global conference on disaster management disaster reduction World Conference on Disaster Reduction Yokohama first Japan Yokohama Japan 1994 first conference Yokohama strategy adopt second World Conference on Disaster Reduction again on Japan where Shogo framework adopt third World Conference right now Sendai framework world effort mention sustainable development goal interrelated World Conference on Disaster Reduction first 1994 and 2000 or 2005 and 2000 yes 2015 frameworks and then it was Sendai 2015 like 2015 2030 Sendai frameworks disaster management gida maru oiba frameworks UN level da decision framework adopt Yokohama strategy Shogo framework and Sendai framework. So if you're interested and curious in geography, you can locate all this in your map from north to south or east to west. So Asini international, this is what is been going on the global side. So Asi the global effort Asina loina magni the important ones. Asina in Adubu Asina global side world level, the UN level that this was going on and these frameworks are being adopted. So India ki side the disaster management ki front sida kari effort laige hanadagi karamba mechanism se adopt orambra India ki side India ki side the what we see is as I 1990s se UN decade for natural disaster reduction haina pa adumaina asigi 1990s ki decade se celebrate tawni observe tawni masi sida even call upon the nations the member nation to formulate national disaster mitigation policies or program adumaina tawsida India su 1995 ta national. This is going to be the first major step for India. Institution framework form to propaganda. Form to institution as far as disaster management is concerned. National Center for Disaster Management. As in 1995. Form the National Center for Disaster Management. See India side. On the global side, all these things are going on. So India side, India domestic front, perhaps the first official or institutionalized step taken by the government of India with regards to disaster management, the setting up of National Center for Disaster Management in 1995. Disaster disaster deal ad hoc basis deal and then of course the responsibility the responsibility of dealing with all these calamities still is in the hands mostly dealt by the state ministry should until 2001 responsibility of disaster management Ministry of Agriculture deal but after 2001 it was transferred to Ministry of Home Affairs. High power committee 1999 JB Pan. Yes. No. Senior JB Pan. JB Pan the high power committee formed disaster issues study high power committee recommend they recommend for disaster management ministry a top ministry an independent ministry to deal with disaster management when they recommend JB Pan the high power JB Pan the high power committee CM committee adubu India is like we policy form in most of the cases reactionary in response to some events anticipate or prepare for example Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Home Affairs, or some steps which were taken with regard to disaster management. 2022, 2001, Gujarat, the earthquake, that was a trigger point. So the government was again shocked by disaster, and then they were again false-footed. So what they do is they transferred from Ministry of Agriculture to Ministry of Home Affairs, and then they started making efforts to deal with disaster management. The effort was going on, but then nothing happened after 2001 again. So in 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami strikes. So India was one of the countries affected by this Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004. So this also becomes the trigger point for India to finally adopt a Disaster Management Act of 2005. So this has been our story of disaster management. Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Home Affairs. So the GB Committee, High Power Committee set up the Ministry of Independent Disaster Management Ministry. It was not done, and it was handed over to the Ministry of Home Affairs, and then we pass on a legal level, legal framework. Now, Disaster Management Act. Disaster Management Act, Management Act 2005 as it passed away. So, as the disaster management policies, so everything that has to do with disaster, this is the major framework where we are basing our disaster management policies, and also all the institutions go. And the disaster management policy management act various institutional frameworks for institutions were established to deal with disaster. Under the National Disaster Management Authority, central level, the state level, and a state disaster management authority. So why I don't want to deal so much time on the technicalities one and here is because these are acts which I cannot explain. Which I cannot explain in the sense I cannot add another word, I cannot remove another word. I do not. Why masida asigi drawbacks ko asigi problems adu mayam du koi naina bi ai. Adu X ki provision makai du di naina du di. I don't think it is necessary, and I think you will find it boring also. What is to be noted here is all the disaster management mechanisms that we have today, almost all, everything is derived from this act. National Disaster Management Authority, State Disaster Management Authority at the state level, and the district level, the district disaster management district level, the state, central, state, district, local level, the disaster management, disaster deal institutional framework is same. National Disaster Response Force, National Disaster Response Force, to deal with a battalion of central police forces which are dedicated, which are Christian as National Disaster Response Force, to deal with disaster deal down about force, a dedicated force drawn from central armed police forces. Similar. And the Prelims point of view, the force, it is headed by an IPS officer, Army General. Most of the time it is headed by IPS officer. Like that, not necessarily maybe the IPS officer and they come under the Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Home Affairs, like that. Aduga what this act does is institutional framework. How are you going to implement and also question disasters, what are the criteria to be declared as a disaster? Nothing is given in this act except for the part where it talks about the definition of disaster. Disaster is like a catastrophe which affects the livelihood, which takes lives, and then which is beyond the coping capacity of the society. Elaborate. So they did not define or give criteria as to when disaster or natural calamity is to be announced. I don't know how to get more clarity like this. So what has been the practice is Oh, the question of discrimination reason discriminatory way disaster law disaster law it's all starts from this. Any disaster strike to be declared as a natural calamity state center declare center has to declare, but state can request the center to declare as such she declare D for excess of funds and then for I am only for excess of relief funds. Disaster management relief relief fund established Indiana National Disaster Policy 2009. Yes, 2009 already. Published and then after that National Disaster Plan should National Disaster Plan Sendai framework Mari National Disaster Plan page page so now I'll go back to what is important. So plan Sendai framework it goes together in the sense that it was base it is in conformity with the Sendai framework. Sendai framework Sendai framework the objective AMG area of focus you can four priority areas under Sendai framework. I list area priority P within this time for 2015 30 members. Sendai framework. So India national disaster management plan, the national plan for disaster management or national disaster management plan. We incorporated this understanding disaster risk, strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. So target. This is the target of target Sendai framework target reduce. And these are all facts. Either you know it or you don't. So what is important here? What is the message that I want to drive here is there is this parallel movement or parallel progression of policies and efforts and commitment towards this issue of disasters and disaster risk reduction at the global level and also at the national level. Global level, I'll list down talk about kaino mayam UN gi makhada adopt to framework mayam strategy mayam like ko domestic level di hojiki ekoi 1994 da national center for disaster management hawdokpodigi hawraga kaino bhaw hoji ekoina national disaster management plan lairi bise ko asi phawbugi journey se asine the effort, the progress that we have made. If you were to able to deal any question on disaster management, what we are going to deal now is the most important thing. I see, that we have to focus on this. So you might say that this is too easy. Why you're even teaching in the class? That is a possibility. Like even if I don't teach anything on disaster management, I have to teach you this. Why? And then I at least have to tell you that you have to be strong on this. Why? Because every question of disaster management revolves around this. Disaster explain pre-disaster phase, post-disaster phase explain one by one I could discuss prevention. Prevention is nothing, right? Prevention is nothing but prevention. Hi, hazard to na disaster the lead tawdanaba ekoi nak thokpa ko asije ekoi kam dauna kari tawragadi ekoi nak thokpa ngamgani ko asidane first yengse hazard. I'm coming back again here because I have to come here. Come on. So prevention ekoi disaster se thokhalloige haiba taragadi ekoi first kari khangbata hazard nang na lairiba mafam adu karamba hazard the prone oibra haiba koi khangpham darkar oibo. Now I will give you the example of Northeast India. Northeast India ekoi Manipur se hairase. Manipur se karamba hazard the prone oibra. Now ekoi earthquake prone oire ko ekoi flood prone oire. Northeast India se ko earthquake prone oire, flood prone oire, landslide prone oire, earthquake prone oire ko and the volcanic prone oidre koida ko. I've listed now I think four hazards. And to prevent tawge hairabadi first like I said identification of hazards. Hazards are identified already. And then what is the next step? Next step is zonation. Zone or zoning the hazard means hazard se kadai de laibra ko abdi karam mafam dana hena hazardous oibra karam mafam dana hena where it is likely to happen ko akoi kaino gi noni gi landslide to yemu. So that reason geological survey officials think that this one I'm just giving you the example, but this might not be factually correct. Why? Because officially the maintained of the these are allegations. So it was alleged that adugi high area adu geological survey matamda it is not safe to live. Then it's like prone oil. Safe oil de haina. Higher. Adudi why are they still living? So actually prevention, mitigation zone hazard zoning area simse ekoina kayamu hazard prone oibra kayamu susceptible oibra I would put thido and then you will take the steps accordingly. For example, masi mafam je live the safe oide landslide prone oye geologically stable oidi hairagadi. For prevention, what is best? Don't live there. Oh, so if you're in a river flood, if you're living in a river valley, in the river channel, near the river channel, it's not safe. So to prevent, what's the best thing? Just don't live there. So, but how will you know? You will only know after identifying the hazard and after zoning the hazard, and then scientifically seeing how vulnerable that region or that area is. Adu laire. Mitigation. So zoning is just one of the aspect of prevention. The prevention adu zoning tawraga area to identify tawraga laiba laitaba or appropriate steps lawba laire ko for adu laire. And then for example epidemic is also a disaster. So how do you prevent it? By following the SOPs. Isolate the protocol ngang chatba, and then disease to spread malaria or drain missing those are the measures that we have to take. Then mitigation. So mitigation is nothing but reducing the impact, the possible impact of the disaster. For example, we are in earthquake zone. If I notice in this earthquake zone, most high, I think we are in 4, 5 ceremony, 5 scale mari laibako. 2 the pab home earthquake zone 1 miss 1 yaude. 2 the 2, 3, 4, 5 and there are 4 zones. We notice a 5th zone most vulnerable 5th zone. Say we are in the 5th zone, but if we notice 5th zone the mitar no high the. So what is the next best option? Mitigation, reducing the impact of this earthquake and thus preventing it from turning into disaster, or at least reducing the impact of these hazards. Building say earthquake resilient building code BIS na piba code follow taraga proper building code say follow taraga buildings sabi offices में हमसे sabi resilient infrastructures का preparedness. So disaster can happen anytime. You don't know when it's going to happen, but when the population is prepared, when the institutional framework is prepared, it is easier to deal with disaster. For example, some National Disaster Response Force, NDRF like the NDRF kumba dedicated force for dealing with disaster like the disaster. There will be chaos. People will not know what to do. And then expert later me rescue operation, relief and rescue operation conduct. If the people are prepared in this mitigation process or train in their schools, school earthquake drill earthquake drill. The society say through education mass media any means the prepare say on all level institutional level, legal level, individual level, societal level, all level they prepare tawragadi madu hena disaster do hazard to strike the we can better deal with it adu like that. And then now we go to disaster. After disaster, first thing that we have to do is disaster response. Earthquake prevention mechanism, mitigation, preparedness, low. The first thing that you have to do is response. The immediate need of that time, of that moment is response. Response the kari kari yaura hairagadi. Response relief yaure ko. Relief flood tabu mafamda. Koi Assam ki flood anda tabu mafamda koi Manipur ki association में am relief material पूरा चल लेना पा volunteer होना इशिंग येन बा चाक चाना बा थक नबी येन बा को relief. First is rescue. Relief लागते हैं rescue होने लागते हैं. I river disaster to the structure hazard to the structure live missing ko vulnerable position the live missing madu mayam do first is rescue tabu mathau tai rescue tabu matung the kari tabu ni relief piba mathau tai ko and then the relief piba do no mang hak chak piba do na sing bottle piba do na di ingbe yar na ko. So what is the next step? The next step is rehabilitation. So this rehabilitation is a temporary process. As in haki me am rescue taukraga relief be shabatunga moisi in some shelters, some camps ko. Adu the moiki like from chafam piba ko haki oiba a temporary provision is rehabilitation. Adu the gidi reconstruction and recovery, building back the society again. So masi reconstruct the question is, are we going to build the same way again? Some have my house was on the river bank, on the river canal, on the river valley, and then during a flood it was swept away. Question is, am I going to build my house again on the same plot of land from which my house was swept away? And unfortunately, that this has been the case in many of the places. Reconstruction, we are committing the same mistake again. So that is something that we have to avoid. We have to avoid. So when we reconstruct, we have to build it better. Reconstruction and recovery, you build back better, you build stronger. So this disaster management is a cycle, like a cycle. It's a continuing process. As disaster must strike, it will strike again. So here we have the pre-disaster phase. Pre-disaster phase, we have all this prevention, mitigation, preparedness. All these are part of capacity building, right? Capacity building. We are building the capacity of the society, of the state, to deal with this disaster. Capacity building. There's the prevention, mitigation, preparedness. Prevention, the identification, zoning of the identification of hazards, zoning of hazards, and then as a prevention, we as a land policies call building code, as and then when disaster strike, what do you do post disaster? You response, relief, rescue, reconstruct, recovery. So this is a cyclic process. And then another disaster will strike, so this will go on. Disaster management, the whole concept is a cyclic concept. It revolves around all these issues that I just talked about. So I now just mentioned about explain that's just a fraction of it. Prevention kari process libra, mitigation the kari tawiyabra, preparedness the kari tawiyabra. I do the ashigi disaster management is class explanation the your notes is more helpful. And I think I'm going to tell sir that I want maybe just one more class on disaster management and then enough. Why? Because I don't want to waste your time on this. Of course, I do like the more class I took, the more money I'm getting. Yes, it's true. Disaster management, only the guidelines of disaster management, guidelines given by National Disaster Management Authority say around 1,500 pages. Guideline any normal, so it's but of no use, of no use to you. And from this exam point of view, I do not And asigi disaster management gi oinadi, I prefer you read notes because concepts explain tawning understand tawning yam like them. So explain the concept tawning understand tawning hai bu. Hoji aina no idang sa hoji khara high ki bu pre disaster phase post disaster phase like it's a cyclic phase ko asida uh, involved our components in hazards like ko aduguma mayam do adu khaktaneba. So there is nothing much adu shu like the but that's the best that I can explain. Maybe it's my inexperience or it's my strong conviction that it is not very much like many classes on disaster management is necessary. Like I said, it's good. The more class I take, I'm getting more money out of you. So I don't want to cheat you on this call. So, and notes say, like I said, please wait for me if you want my notes call. So if you want to refer to other notes, okay, fine, I have no problem. I would be lying. We do not. I can just say read that note, and finish it. I will not be doing my duty. I will not be doing what I'm supposed to do. I do not. And also, I also believe that I can be of some value, or I can put in some value in your preparation. That's why I'm here. So, no, in a not so power and the Gyanta, the Bakari Lego should have but I believe disaster management is no problem like any like 30,000 a day. So, disaster management either deal to Matamdadi, carry down, like I said. I'll tell you prelims ki the Makta Karam Karamba, the Hangbayagani or mains ki the Kamana Hangani, Umahayo to call. Do the yes that I will do my part. Aduna Masida. I just took a screenshot from a call. I see risk reduction, quick response recovery. I see risk reduction say can only pre-disaster call during disaster recovery process. I see that. I see. I'm gonna talk later. I could call. My mode credit. It would be enough. You know, as I explained over the video, so like I said, it's just one aspect of it. Called creating legal and institutional framework, hazard and vulnerability analysis, planning to risk reduction, installing. It's just concept nila actually profession. From prelims point of view, aina ek मैम से ek sida suppose National Disaster Management Authority se kanana head tobra adugumuko adugidi notes to PDF to pirani no exam mains ki especially mains ki nena si paper di ko PDF to pasana same pirage or if not na mo in pa atopa resource pagi hai su kai do aina no in the thaba ama leramani security challenges ka na lari ama ai telegram da thaba male do so si disaster management ki se dum yaw bani bu guidelines do da gum di yaw ra do guidelines gum se lari ayam da aina dum yengak lari phau di hoji guideline specific oi badi deal to badi thinga de ko aduna adu thinga da gi aina adu I think I have some value addition. I can add some value in your preparation. I have to go. That 1,500 pages, the extract of that I will do my part. Okay, fine. I PDF version same what is important material use exam karmane gini hai ko the mark rate to read 60 pages. Is it desirable? For me, it's no. Word limit you have to write only 100 words, 100, 120 words. But 60 pages the word piano. I do not condense so that I will do it. Asi institutional mechanism. Asi di like lo ni yaw ni asi di kari no explain the whole use. Saying na hai disaster management. Apart from that concepts ko, I think there is nothing much to explain. Asi in biro. Asi se prelims point of view the gidi kana ko se. The 100 prelims test kumba weekly test kumba tawrak paganda. Question semani disaster management the prelims the hang be question kara ko. Sema hanga ke. So masih issue the question hang be aba si karino har kang sai kon ngasai have discussed talk do disaster management ek ki makhada disaster se lab thokado ba disaster announce to ba disaster ni haina lab thokado bi provision laite have to pa adugum do prelims ta nai yawi ga haina chumra langbra ga haina ko adugum bi prelims question yam frame to bi ai ko adu asi ki nodal ministry thing se asi khangmo pai asi khangjilo rules or all related or in cause of nine asi khangjilo so asi I nahan particularly to the loin yaw ne ko prelims point of view to what we often do is asi gumba table na am se no yi dekhang de ko this is my preparation what I do is tables in maru odina pe yang pa hekta skip to top ne ko do prelims de shi gumba na shat la han da wo se yare aduga kano se hazard che if necessary ko ai na noina ai la sungang na ke hojik geography class loira ko kuma matam do geography class loira matam da maybe one class hojik lawo class se geography class loira ga waina and laina ko so we have request auraga kitang hazard to mukhan naina se kari no har gadi I think some of you are new also the geography gi concept thing khar lairam dam su yai ko adu oidragadi aina sida kano taw matamda tang noi kana roi dawra or kana budi kana always good ko adubu adugi tungda tawragadi henna kana ga dawba doina khanbaina ko so that's just my idea or my thought on it. So so if I were to sum up the whole of disaster management ko hierarchy karino hierarchy I'll just sum up in 2 minutes the concepts that you need to have. One is India is prone to disaster and India is prone to disaster of many types because India is a big country. India is prone to tsunami. First, the Kangalopa conception. What are the hazards that India is prone to? List of you find out the hazards area area specific hazards but no hazard is area specific or no disaster is area specific. Certain regions cannot live in. For example, Rajasthan third desert iron. Yes, it's not prone it is not prone to any of the hazards, but flood is less likely to happen there, right? In the third desert. Rajasthan in the third desert. So specific the earthquake zone area which part of India is more prone to earthquake. Concepts in geography understanding when you apply the idea of geography in your answer writing of disaster management, it would be wonderful. So when I hazard later India the hazard and then India is prone to disaster and India ranked very high in global disaster index. We are in top 10. I think we are in top 5 now. S7. We are ranked very high. And the disaster management the process that you can divide it into three parts: pre-disaster, disaster, and then post-disaster. And then the important components or elements of disaster and disaster management are vulnerabilities. So you know what vulnerabilities is I have explained. So nang na horen capacity building you try to reduce the vulnerabilities. So you know what is capacity building, and I explain ko. If you picked up, I explain when you picked up any notes or book, standard book that is available, so here my effort or my contribution towards your preparation for this disaster management, like I said, it's more like the direction call, and then I have the question specific way guidelines mayam gumba like the yaurab the way call mayam do I should loin the so I'm just talking about some notes that are available in the markets, and then there are like standard books in the yabu to do high the and have a guideline specific way the question may am deal the capacity the light and let me help you on that part. Otherwise, please the prelims key point of view the question of the test platform the help. So that's it. Disaster management will be I'll talk to sir. Let's finish here. Instead of that, you study, and then after the geography classes are over, I'll request sir for one more class if needed call. And then I'll give you the PDF on this two papers that I really love. So internal security, the one more is left. Some topics are left and the cyber security for deal with the. So if any one of you are new, I know what may I join the what I want to say is don't leave it in between. So sometimes it takes time, to be honest. Cover pava or it takes like 1 month, 2 months to get habituated. So maybe the nature of the subject might be boring to you. It's possible, and my explanation might be a little bit not up to your expectation. That's a possibilities. What I want to say is hang on, because if once you're habituated with the system with the approach of the exam, you're going to enjoy it. So just hang on. Initial phase struggle. So that's the part where we have to be careful, not to just let go. So that is the end of disaster management. If there is any question, you're welcome to ask. If not, you can leave, or I'll be here for 5 more minutes and we can talk and care about other things, anything, any topic, exam, not exam. I'll be here for 5 more minutes.